Blog Talk Radio.
Fired. Can we get EMS code 3 Washburn and 51st Street? Got one down.
Copy. Shots fired at Washburn and 53rd Street. Correction, 51st. Sergeant to acknowledge shots fired and one down at Washburn. Copy. Copy 502.
506 as well.
Copy 506.
Flight to vertical and pending and 10 out.
Copy.
530, I'm starting CPR.
Copy 530, starting CPR.
530, we're in the mouth of the alleyway, 51st Street, Washburn, even side.
Copy, north of alley, 50 at 51st Street, even side. Copy 520, arrived out with them. Squad 530, are you code 4 for medical?
530, code 4 for medical.
530, code 4 for medical at 2345.
530, there are no suspects at large.
Copy 530, no suspects at large.
520, where is EMS on this?
EMS is coming, rescue is coming.
502, they're behind me at 53rd and Oliver.
Rescue's arrived.
530, well, next squad in if they could block eastbound traffic at 51st and Xerxes. I have 51st and Washburn right here.
521 will move there.
And 521, let's get this alley blocked off on the very north side, so off 50th, please.
502, I'm on scene.
Copy 502 on scene.
5502 will be arriving in the block.
5502 arriving in the block. Information, 1st Precinct, a sergeant to acknowledge the sound of shots fired. 119, 33rd Street West. 2 shots heard from the east.
505, copy the call.
At 2348. Copy 505.
541.
541.
We heard those sounds from the station. Those are probably aerial fireworks.
Copy 541. Those shots are possibly aerial fireworks.
505.
505.
Request seizure.
505. The last words came in broken. 505 came in broken.
505, requesting response cars because we have squads tied up with this shooting.
Copy, requesting response cars. Squad 505, are those response cars for 911 or to the scene?
For now, they could come to answer 911 calls, and if we need them, they could go to the scene. But for now, 911 is response.
Copy 505.
5502F, car 9, call me, please.
Yeah, car 9, I'm actually on the way out to Washburn.
502 on my seat.
Squad 505, Precinct 3 and 4 have shootings right now. We are still checking on 1st and 3rd.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode, A Murder on the Color of Law. On the 18th of July 2017. This story is a story on a tree-lined street of stucco houses in the Midwest city of Minneapolis. An Australian native named Justine Damond was brutally murdered by a police officer in the city of Minneapolis. We're looking here at the coverage from Australia, and this is what they have found so far, and it is basically the storyline in newspapers here in the U.S. Friends of the Sydney woman, she was from Sydney, she trained to be a veterinarian, and then she moved to being a meditation/yoga instructor in Australia. When we finish here, you will hear some of her dialogue teaching one of her classes and a brief news conference, a statement we'll call it, from her fiancé, Mr. Damond. It's a tragic, very tragic situation, what has occurred in the U.S., and we'll go to the Washington Post in a minute and get the statistics. Over 500 murders by police officers. She was shot to death at basically 23:50 local time on Saturday night. The officers were not wearing body cameras. They were wearing them, but they were turned off, the requirement from the department. An unfortunate situation there. Many questions to be asked about what went on, period. But the problem here is more than that. It is a systemic problem within the U.S. of repeated situations where people are murdered under color of law. In other words, by police officers. There have been, from the Washington Post, there have been more than 500 fatal shootings by police in the U.S. this year. Raises serious concerns in our home country, no doubt, because in Australia people do not carry firearms. Now, this is a very interesting situation when we look at the storyline that they are trying to develop. First of all, this has been turned over to a state agency called the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and you understand from its title, they quote-unquote apprehend criminals. In the case of Philando Castile, they spent the majority of their time, 90% of their time, investigating Mr. Castile, not the officer that was involved. So this is a biased agency to begin with. The evidence itself was stacked in the other direction, and you can see from what they were doing here in this particular item, this lady, a person that worked in, we'll call peace work, basically speaking. She was in meditation, she was in yoga, she was not in any type of aggressive training, firearm training, etc. And she would have not had experience with firearms. But yet what happened here was she was treated as such, and the investigation alludes to that. What we know at this point in time, no firearms, and you can understand where they're going with this, were found, they say, at the scene. Well, if she had a firearm and was killed, how did the firearm move? She was in her night clothes, pajamas, they said there. So she was there. She did have a mobile phone. The mobile phone was by her body. And from the coroner's report that officially labeled it a homicide, she was shot in the stomach, which would mean she was standing by this vehicle talking to one of the coppers. And the other copper, Mr. Mohammed Noor, N-O-R-R, was in the passenger seat, and he shot by the copper she was talking to and fatally killed her. Now, the problem is this. We have no, as far as we know, audio or video evidence. So the only thing they will go on will be the forensics, which we know will be the gun fob, maybe some patterns there. Perhaps she touched the car, we don't know. But those kinds of things, and statements from the officers, which no one can contradict the officers unless someone was standing in the alley or leaning out the back door, etc. It's between them. In other words, it's a star chamber literally on the darkness. It was dark at night. So we have no way of knowing what the facts are. They continue to say, well, we'll put the facts out as we have them. Well, we have the homicide finding there. The finding by quote-unquote several sources, there was no gun involved. I have not heard about a knife, but I doubt very seriously she was carrying a knife. So what would have been a quote-unquote threatening gesture there that this Mohammed Noor character would have not been, would have felt threatened. And of course the person she was talking to, the copper, did nothing. And she was standing, first of all, outside the vehicle. It had been very simple to roll up the window and pull away and call back up and come back. Now, this goes into the training. The training itself is highly deficient. One lady was saying about the de-escalation. Well, there wasn't any de-escalation involved here as far as we know. We don't have any way to prove there was an escalation. And according to what we know about her from the reports, and that's all we have, that she would have not done that. She would have de-escalated a situation there. She had reported she heard some noise in the alley. Perhaps someone was being sexually assaulted. Now, we don't know about any of those people. They had obviously disappeared before the police arrived. Now, we don't know when we'll get a timetable on exactly when the call was in. We came in, you heard the call released from this site. That was the response call, and they talked about giving CPR, etc. But she was dead at the scene. That part we do know. So the only thing we're literally waiting on now is any type of fingerprint evidence, etc., and the statements of the officers, which they should have already given. Today is Tuesday. All that material should be out, and they should publish a report. Now, as far as trying to fix anything up, they've got big problems here. We don't know of any criminal record on her part. Well, we're waiting to see if there were any calls from that resident to 911 in the past. We don't know that yet. No doubt it will come out. And if she even had a parking ticket, it will come out. What we do know about this Noor character, he had been there about 2 years, and he'd had 2 complaints filed against him, actually 3. One was on the seal, and again, this is how those kinds of things are handled by that particular department. And some retired social worker said effectively when she was removed from her house that it was false imprisonment. Now that is an ongoing complaint or a lawsuit. Let me go back to ABC here in Australia, and we are have gratitude to them and also to the Sydney Morning News when we started this particular situation. Let me see if we can go down here to, we got a medical examiner, we got that in autopsy there, and the finding of homicide, that would be the first finding there as far as stomach content, etc. That will come later. And when we leave, you will hear from the fiance of Mrs. Damond. A statement from the attorney here, which this is the attorney for Noor. Makes no sense at all. Noor says he takes the shooting seriously. Now, that's kind of an oddball statement here. They show that he's smiling, but why would he not take the statement seriously, or the situation seriously? It's a very serious situation. I was talking to Nancy Lockhart, who covers many of these affairs and deals with wrongful conviction and has been doing with those. I wanted to have on the show. We'll get her on the show. But nonetheless, this just seems a very flippant statement to say he takes it seriously. It is taken seriously. The people of Australia are taking it seriously. The neighbors there in Minnesota are taking it seriously. And any other human being at service to humanity should take it seriously. Now, the exact circumstances behind the shooting remain unclear, despite the release of unofficial recording dialogue. We have that. You heard that. His lawyer said in a statement, Noor extends his condolences. Again, this is flippant to the family and anyone else who has been touched by this event. He takes their loss seriously. Now, this Pluckett is not doing his client any service here, and he's rated as one of the better criminal attorneys in the area. Period. But this taking things seriously is crazy. Now, according to him, this North character arrived in the U.S. at a young age and is thankful to have so many opportunities. He has a degree in business, and he's been in property management prior to that. He's 31 years old. We know that. He joined the department in 2015, and he's the first Somali-type officer assigned to that particular precinct in that part of the city. And they had a picture of him smiling here and in his uniform. We'll put the other one up there. But anyway, to the complaints, a retired social worker alleged she'd called 911 for a different situation. Some male on a retaining wall smoking cannabis. Anyway, he had a total of 3 complaints. 2 were from this year, and 1 from 2016 is closed, and it is marked not to be made public. So we don't know where that is there, but we do have the recording out there, and you're going to hear much more of this case. And what we'll be looking at here is to see what this Bureau of Criminal Apprehensions does, what is their pattern. They obviously trying to reflect as much upon Justine Damond as they can. If her record is spotless, they are, as they say, in a pickle, quite literally. And if they can cook up some kind of tale, but the problem is in these tales, as LBJ would say, they went to the well too many times, and it's getting to be very old. This is an international case by virtue of who she was, and the community, of course, organizing there, and the BBC, there. So in other words, this is went international way before Philando Castile went international. Of course, there's also Mr. Jamar Clark, who was killed, and there was never an explanation of that other than they took the officer's statements and claimed he was reaching for a gun. And we find out that there was a 911 call supposedly from a girlfriend of his, and it was not made by a girlfriend. It was made by an attendant in one of the emergency vehicles. So a lot of things came out there that not only was he killed, but the coppers that killed him ended up being promoted. So all these kinds of things are swirling around here with this department, and the leadership in that city does need to do some things and move forward. Period. And this thing will obviously grow as we get more information this week. We'll leave this and go to another pressing item here in the U.S. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, it is dead for now. The old man, McConnell, has lost 2 other people, Moran of Kansas and Lee of Utah. So he doesn't really have enough people now to put the item up there, and that is also Rand Paul and Susan Collins, and there are more coming on board with this. So if they cannot replace it, DJ Trump just said, well, repeal it. That's not going to work out, because by repealing it, they will throw millions of people off of Obamacare and into the streets, quite literally. So these kinds of setbacks, normally when you have this type of situation out there, the bill is just killed, and that is the end of that. But some of the conservatives like Meadows of North Carolina, time for full repeal. He can try a full repeal, but effectively what he will be doing is cutting off the re-election possibilities of many of these Republicans that are running for re-election in 2018. And there'll be some surprises there, not only in the states like Hella and Nevada, etc., but also in some of the other states that one would assume that they are pretty safe, that DJ Trump won by 25 or 30 points. That's not necessarily the case now. Many things are changing. And McConnell is also threatening to work with the Democrats, which he should do, and fix the exchange. It could be easily fixed. They continue on. And from Senator Johnson of Wisconsin, he hinted that he might vote against advancing the measure to the floor. So in other words, a lot of these characters here, and they claim they're waiting on the old man McCain. He's 80 years old, had eye surgery. Well, so he's not there to do anything. Removed a blood clot there. Period. But evidently he's okay. The possibility is that the blood clot's related to his history of melanoma, dangerous skin cancer. Well, he's 80 years old, so again, that is not a big situation there. From New York, the Attorney General there, Snyderman, threatened money to sue the federal government if the health bill becomes law. So in other words, there are a lot of things going on out here. The CBO talking with their report, they obviously can't score anything now. 22 million people would be thrown off of health care. And at the same time, Beauregard Sessions wants to do more seizures of cash and property. He was speaking there in Minneapolis to the National District Attorneys Association. No criminal should be allowed to keep the proceeds of their crimes. Well, the problem with the forfeited law was that much of the so-called property being forfeited was not property that was came from illegal means. Evidently, in law enforcement officers took more property from citizens than burglars, quite literally. Drug Enforcement Administration had taken more than $3 billion in cash from people not charged with any crime, and that's part of the problem right there. The process is ripe for abuse. A case in Oklahoma, 53,000 owned by a Christian band, an orphanage, and a church after stopping a man on a highway for a broken tail light. They took the money, and I suppose it disappeared. So thus, Attorney General Holder issued sharp curtailing of the act under him. So Beauregard wants to reinstate this. One of the problems that Beauregard Session has in this whole DJ Trump administration is their numbers in the polls drop and their popularity drops. Many of these things that they are trying to do will be undone. An example of that was under the immigration ban from the 6 Muslim countries not letting grandparents in. They rescinded that. Tillerson, Minister of State, sent a cable out, well, we can let grandparents in now. So in other words, these people are all over the place there. And on another situation, there's a visa program for quote-unquote temporary workers. DJ Trump has promised an America First policy, but yet they're going to let 15,000 immigrants in to the country temporarily to work at resorts and those kinds of places, claiming they cannot find people to work there seasonally. That obviously is false. They're not advertising for American workers, because when they import other workers in, they have to take care of lodging, etc. So it all amounts to, literally, if you look at it, more than $10 an hour. I don't know what they are paying, but room and board, etc. So they are in that situation, as one would say, a pickle. Let's do the sports here. It's a shorter broadcast, but we'll get it all done. The Nationals were in Cincinnati. Nationals 6-1 Toronto was in Fenway Park. The Blue Jays are 4-3 over the Red Sox. And the Rangers were in Camden Yards. The Orioles pulled it out 3-1. The Cubs have left town. The Brewers were in Pittsburgh. Pirates are 4-2. The Cardinals were in New York. The final score there was 6-3. Cardinals over the Mets. And in 10, the Phillies were in Florida. Marlins 6-5. The Cubbies were in Atlanta, and they drove old Dixie down, so to speak. 4-3 was the score. The Lions scored 9 hits, 1 error for the Cubbies, 6 hits and 2 errors for the Atlanta team. The Yankees were in Minnesota. Twins 4-2. In 10, the Mariners were in Houston, and they actually pulled the game out 9-7. The Tigers were in Kansas City, and they did have Tony the Tiger with them. 4-2 was the final score. The Padres were in Denver. Rockies 9-6 over the Padres. The Rays were in Oakland. Athletics. The Rays 3-2 over the Athletics. And finally, Cleveland was in the Bay Area. 5-3 was the score. Cleveland over the hapless Giants. That'll do it for the sports and our presentation, Murder on the Color of Law, on the 18th of July 2017 from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Good day.
Every time you gather to share wisdom or come together, you do a welcome to country if it's your tribe's land. If it's not your land and you're not a member of that direct community, they call it an acknowledgement of country. And so I'd just like to sort of honor that tradition because I think it's really beautiful. You can close your eyes if you like, but just feeling into the earth underneath you and acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land, the Ojibwe tribes and the Dakota Sioux.
A brief statement. He will not be taking questions at this time, and we thank you in advance for respecting the privacy of our family.
Thank you for being here. First of all, I want to thank our family here and in Australia, our friends from all over the world, our colleagues and our neighbors for the amazing outpouring of love and support that we've received. Our hearts are broken, and we are utterly devastated by the loss of Justine. As you know, it was Justine who called 911 on Saturday evening, reporting what she believed was an active sexual assault occurring nearby. Sadly, her family and I have been provided with almost no additional information from law enforcement regarding what happened after police arrived. We've lost the dearest of people, and we are desperate for information. Piecing together Justine's last moments before the homicide would be a small comfort as we grieve this tragedy. The death of Justine is a loss to everyone who knew her. She touched so many people with her loving and generous heart. She was a teacher to so many in living a life of openness, love, and kindness. Our lives are forever changed as a result of knowing her. She was so kind and so darn funny. She made us all laugh with her great wit and her humor. It is difficult to fathom how to go forward without her in my life. We ask that you respect our privacy as we grieve the loss of our dear Justine. We will provide more statements as information comes to light. Thank you.